In this video, we're going to take a look at the Woodpeckers Spline Jig and how you can use it with these 3 different Ultra-Shear flat top grooving saw blades. This jig can handle projects of all different sizes, so whatever you need to add a spline to, we're going to cover it in this video. First, let's take a look at the spline jig. This tool easily slides across the table saw and against the rip fence thanks to these UHMW glide strips. The 2 Super Track aluminum extrusions feature scales in both inch and metric, and also have built-in T-slots that house 4 adjustable flip stops for repeatability. You can also adjust the spline jig to 2 different settings. The more narrow option is great for projects that are longer than 16 inches. But for today, I'm going to keep the spline jig set at the wider setting. To get the best results when using the spline jig, you're definitely going to want to use a flat top grooving saw blade instead of your standard cross-cut and ripping saw blades. And mainly because these blades feature an alternating bevel that leaves behind a ridge in the groove. And this can create unsightly gaps in your projects once you add the splines, since there isn't a perfectly flat groove for the wood to fit into. So let's first take this 1/4 inch flat top grooving blade for a test run on this larger box that I have here. I already have the position of my splines all marked out, as well as how deep I want them to be. I like to first roughly center the jig over the saw blade, and then position all 4 stops up against the edge of my workpiece to basically just sandwich it in place. Then I can adjust the blade to sit just below my workpiece, and then adjust my fence over to get the position of the spline sorta close. I like to dial in the final position though, using my rip flip. This brass knob right here allows me to make tiny micro adjustments to the position of my fence, making this setup process super easy. Lastly, I can slide my workpiece over and raise the saw blade up to reference the line I had already marked out to set the depth of cut. For some added safety, you can also choose to use these pivot clamps if you'd like. They definitely help to keep your project firmly in position, but they do add a few extra seconds to each cut with the time that it takes to clamp and unclamp. And for that reason, I like to avoid using this clamp when safety isn't a concern on larger projects like this box. It just makes the process go by a bit quicker, and as you can see, adding these 1/4 inch splines to this box took practically no time at all. Next, let's take a look at what we need to do differently to add splines to a smaller box like this. You'll quickly notice that this box is a little too small to utilize the flip stops, but thankfully, there's a fix for that. We just need to adjust the fences to the narrow setting temporarily to allow access for the flip stops to slide into the bottom of the Super Track. Then, once all 4 are in position, we can set the 2 fences back to their original setting. I went ahead and swapped out my blade, this time to a 3/16 inch kerf, and then marked some layout lines on my box, just like before. After I went through the setup process and got everything all dialed in again, I made my cut on all 4 sides of the box to create my spline. Now for smaller boxes like this, I always use the pivot clamp since there's less material to hold on to and really control the position of the box. So the spline jig can handle small boxes and big boxes just fine. But what about skinny frames like this? Well, for these, I like to use our smallest 1/8 inch kerf flat top grooving saw blade. Of course, I begin by going through the setup process again, but once that's all dialed in, we're ready to cut. The spline jig can handle all different sizes of frames just fine. Once you sandwich the frame in place with the 4 stops, the frame stands nice and stable in an upright position all the way through the cut. Of course, cutting the splines is only half the job. You then have to machine some strips that'll fit nice and snug into the grooves. And for that, I like to use my planer. You can also use a drum sander if you have one of those. To install the splines, I'll spread some glue in the groove and on the wood, and then slide it in place and just let the glue set up. Once it's had time to dry in position, I'll come back with a flush cut saw to cut away most of the material and then sand everything nice and flush. I really hope you guys enjoyed this closer look into the spline jig and the 3 different flat top grooving Ultra-Shear saw blades that I got to use with this today. If you have any questions at all, please leave them in the comments below. Thank you so much guys for watching, and I'll see you next time here on Red Tool Woodshop.